Now that you've found UBN Radio and discovered our quality talk shows, it's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's ubnradio.com.
No way. No way.
Gotta get my microphone. She's too busy fraternizing with the audience.
Good idea.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. You have tuned into, once again, Dr. Judy WTF here at UBN Radio Network. I am Walt Lusk, your host, with, of course, the illustrious and world-renowned and world-famous author, Dr. Judy Rosenberg. And last week we had a great show. If you want to know what the Freud means, which is WTF, just tune into last week's show. It's up on YouTube, and people are already commenting. And that was a fun show. We learned a lot about Dr. Freud.
For sure.
And this
stuff I didn't even myself know. It's fascinating.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. And this week we're going to take a different switch. We're going to, since we've done a lot of shows on the Mascot child and the Scapegoat child and the lost child and the golden child from a narcissistic parent perspective, we're going to focus on the only child. And actually, this is a call-in show, and we only want to hear from you lonely onlys, because my understanding is you were your parents' favorite child.
And unfavorite.
And unfavorite child.
And everything in between.
And everything in between.
Right.
Because in the last 10 years, in the last 20 years, the number of lonely onlys has doubled. There's about 23% of all children born today are only children. And so you can call us at area code 323-843-2826. Or if you're international, you can reach us on Skype at UBN Radio number 2. Or you can listen to us, of course, on Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and all your illustrious subscriptions and comments on YouTube. So anything else going on? And by the way, rumor has it that Dr. Judy herself is an only lonely child.
So I will clarify the rumor. It is true. It is true. I was the best and the worst of it all.
That's what your dad said.
And my mom, too.
And your mother.
Yeah. Got it from both ends. So
I
will
can only imagine.
I will definitely give you my perspective. But you see, we're systems thinkers, and it's different in every single family, because you can be the only child in a family where, and we do a lot of this kind of topic, where mom is narcissistic or dad is absent, or dad is present and mom has passed away, or there's every single possible dynamic. And another category I want to bring up is that sometimes when there's a lot of space between siblings, for example, if you're the firstborn and you're 20 years old and your mom and dad have another child, well, that's kind of like being the only child, because by then your adulthood, your formative years are done, and you've lived your life as an only child. So I'm including these people as well.
Yeah, there's a little overlap, of course, between firstborn and only child, but exactly. Yeah. And there's a lot of misconceptions which started way back. Think about only children for a moment. What comes to mind? According to stereotypes, kids without siblings are purportedly being lonely, spoiled, precocious, selfish, headstrong, bad at making friends, and generally bratty. Well, judgments about this came about from an American society from a guy named Granville Stanley Hall, an American psychologist from 1895.
Wow. So he was doing research on only children?
Yes.
That's
and
pretty interesting.
He came up with some goofy concepts and conclusions that didn't hold water, and subsequently everybody has this stereotypical stuff. However, studies over the last few decades have begun to turn this century-old stereotype on its head. Research within the past 20 years has shown that single children are not necessarily worse off growing up without siblings. In fact, they may actually benefit from their parents' undivided attention and financial resources.
So that's a positive end, right?
Yes, it is. It's a positive part.
So if there's one child to support, then that one child will probably have money for college funds.
Yes.
Will probably have money for extracurricular activities.
Yes.
Versus a family of 5 that makes it tough for mom and dad to send off all their kids to ballet lessons, piano lessons, gymnastics lessons, art lessons, and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So
that is a good point. And again, it depends on the family structure. It depends on economics, right? So being in in an only child situation in a very, very profoundly poor family is going to still impact that child. So okay, we're going to talk about all these factors. That's what makes it rich and interesting.
I've got a plethora of factors, but remember that back in the day when we were an agricultural society, we got up on the farm, at crack of dawn, and everybody did their thing and milked the cows and went out and worked in the fields and whatnot. So having a child was an asset, and obviously none of children live as long as they're doing, and health-wise. So we obviously aren't that kind of society anymore. So there's really no need. And also, there's been a lot of stuff from China, because they only wanted one children, and usually it was a male, which kind of goofed things up for a while.
Yeah,
for some strange reason.
So no wonder the percentage of only children.
We're talking about in America.
Oh, in America.
That's an American statistic. Okay. Yes. So a bunch of things that we're going to talk about only a only child would understand. We don't match the stereotypes, as we've already talked about. Some feel they're spoiled, rotten brats, but you know what? They really are normal people. And I would think,
speak for yourself, Walt.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. I think you're fairly normal.
Fairly normal. Okay.
We prefer to avoid conflict. We don't grow up with siblings to torment or be tormented by, so therefore, naturally, we are adverse to peer conflict.
And I have to concur. I'll use myself as a case study since I am an only child, and I will say that I don't butt heads. It's just not my style. I'm a peacemaker. I'd rather live in panel number 7. For any of you who've been watching the show, panel 7 creates an interconnected system. It's about really sharing and connecting, and that's a big deal for me.
Really about healing human disconnect?
Yeah. And one thing that I will say is that I think that who I am today is a result of my being an only child, because only children also tend to have a lot of responsibility on their shoulder. And so I just took it upon myself to take on healing human disconnect and healing global disconnect, and and always fantasizing about wanting to do that. So just a little project I've always had in my mind. Since forever. Are we having a caller in?
No, I just got a comment from Facebook. Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay.
What's interesting is they brought up is there's the misnomer, which I think is in here somewhere, about imaginary friends, and some
imaginary.
Yes,
friends.
a lot of single children have imaginary friends who also have imaginary friends.
Who also have imaginary.
Yes, sometimes.
Friends. Well, I had a real dog, and I called my dog my sister, and that dog was my anti-lonely pill, so to speak. And she got all my love, all my attention. I begged for her to sleep in my bed. And through phases of my life when I didn't have a dog, I would always beg my parents obnoxiously, just hound them. I like that pun, actually. I'd hound them for a dog. And I always managed to have a dog by my side, even till this day.
Yes.
My dog is really my best friend. And so I think that it depends, too. If you're an only lonely and you have a pet by your side, that's a huge shift. If you're an only lonely and you have a lot of friends and extended family and cousins, I had a lot of cousins. I was fortunate to have cousins because they became kind of like brothers and sisters to me. So, again, it's so dependent on the family structure. But then there are people who truly live in isolation and they truly are disconnected because they don't have access, let's say, to their relatives. They only have access to people in school for example, which is a big deal. It's a big deal because you form peer connections there, and so that's a big important shift also in the framework of loneliness or lack thereof.
Yes, and to deal with that, oftentimes you're a ferocious reader.
I was not. I was somewhat of a reader, but I was more of an artist. I would sit for hours and hours, and my other best friend was my pencil and my colored pencils. And I would just sit and draw and draw. I would draw portraits of my grandmother, my grandfather, and I would draw caricatures and cartoons, and I would just get lost in my pencils because at night when my parents were doing their thing, I was alone in my room with very little to do. And at times when I didn't have my dog, because there were periods of times where I lived in an apartment building with my parents where there were no pets allowed, my pencil became my best friend.
Yeah. Okay. Because, reading an exciting novel, adventure for a city dweller, observing the dynamics of inner workings of a wrong story. Excuse me. Without the existence of built-in family playmate, we have to find other ways to occupy our time, and it's often imaginary. So there you go. So drawing is a great example.
Yeah.
We love hanging out with big families because, of course, they didn't have any, right?
Right.
Loved to watch the dynamics of a large family.
Loved it.
And
loved getting together with the family.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just love the stimulation. And one unhealthy defense mechanism that I remember is watching way too much TV, because not only was I lonely, but I also was latchkey for a while. So part of the company was just I grew up in Montreal, Canada, and there were, I think, 2 channels to choose from. And it was always I Love Lucy and Gilligan's Island and Bewitched and something like that.
And Brady Bunch and
not
Family.
that, which dates me, okay? But the television was also my company, and the telephone. So calling my cousin up, calling my grandparents up, that was a very, very big deal. And then the biggest deal, of course, was when my cousin moved in to a block away from me, and I got a bicycle, and I was able to bike over there or walk over there, and so I had mobility. So that's another big deal. And so This is all dependent, and everybody's circumstance is different. And we really do want to hear from you. So
it's a call-in show. You want to get on the couch with Dr. Judy, whether you have an emotional ouch or not. And again, the number is area code 323-843-2826, or internationally on Skype at UBN Radio number 2.
So go on. What else did you find out about?
They tend to be closer to their friends because they don't have anybody else to be close to, right? They treat their friends like brothers and sisters, as you've said, that they never had. We're not satisfied with casual acquaintances, and we talk for hours on the phone with any and every type of friend we could find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But we don't mind being alone.
Well, if you have too much alone, you start minding being alone.
Yeah.
So as I've mentioned in several episodes, when you have healthy dependency, then you have healthy independence. But if the dependency is cut short because either the parents are working or the parents in my family dynamics, my parents were so into each other and not as into their child. Okay, so I was kind of like the sideline, and they were the main focus. So in that dynamic, of course, it was a matter of it created a yearning for company.
Yeah, you had to find a lot of creative ways to
absolutely
be entertained in one way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
So they like having people in the background. I thought this was interesting. they would invite a bunch of people over to her house, this lady, and hang out. But she'd hang out by herself in her own room. But, they were there, and she could go hang out with them if she wanted, or to come back. It was just having them in the background, not necessarily directly interfacing with them, interacting with them.
So I want to talk a little bit about that, because there's a concept that we bring up a lot called mirroring.
Mm-hmm.
And mirroring is when you have another human being that you have eye contact with, that gets you, that's in your presence. And even if they're not directly speaking to you, just their presence makes a human being feel contained. So if the house is empty and the person is all alone, that's an example of human disconnect. We talk a lot about human connect and human disconnect. And what does human disconnect do to the brain is what it does is it kind of like a disconnection of the wiring. So it makes it really hard to focus, and it makes it really hard to self-generate, because we're wired to connect is the way we are as human beings.
Yes,
and so if we're too disconnected, then we start focusing on what isn't rather than what is. And we start focusing on filling the void rather than generativity and creativity. So that becomes an issue for only children, because then they start becoming preoccupied with who's not home, and maybe the fear of being alone at home would be an example, or waiting for parents to come home, and just standing there and getting a little bit obsessive. I can remember that we didn't have cell phones at the time, and so I can remember waiting for my parents to come home, and sometimes they'd come home really late at night because they worked, and I'd be there only lonely, standing at the window, waiting, counting. I'd get into this obsessional counting, and then I'd say crazy, superstitious things to myself, like, I'm going to count to 100. If they are not home by the time I reach 100, they were in a car accident and they're dead.
There you go.
Okay? And then I'd count to 100 and they weren't home. So I thought, no, that's not it. I'm going to go and walk around the house, and if I step on a crack, remember,
they're not coming back.
They're not coming back. So I tippy-toe across. So these are, I'm pointing to this because these are great defense mechanisms against anxiety. So how do you bind anxiety when you're alone, when you're not contained? Is you become ritualistic, you become superstitious in your behavior.
I was going to say, is the movie Home Alone one of your favorite movies?
Yeah, I wasn't that mischievous. Maybe I would have been more fun had I been that mischievous. I just didn't think about that kind of stuff. But yeah, that was a pretty fun movie because it took a new twist on being alone. So like, let's make some trouble here. Okay?
Well,
but that wasn't me.
He tried to avert trouble as well. So
correct. Correct.
And you might relate to this as well.
Yeah.
They are old souls.
I think I can relate to that.
Majority of our interactions outside of school, of course, are with adults. Mm-hmm. And a little more mature than our peers. As such, we act older than our age.
And I think that's a huge factor, because my friends were my grandparents, my parents, my uncles, my aunts, sometimes my cousins, but I was much more used to adult conversations. So when I got around peers, it was a little bit boring for me because they were speaking, fifth grade speak or second grade speak, and I was used to more sophisticated conversations, which is probably why I became a psychologist, because I like the more in-depth, juicy stuff. So I think that is something that can trend in only children, in that they crave deeper conversations. They crave more, quote, adult-like conversations.
Well, then there's the conversation.
Yeah?
Every only child eventually gets the talk about why there's no brothers or sisters.
Oh, that was a bad one for me. That was a bad one.
Yes,
of course, I hounded them for more children, just like I hounded them for a dog. And in my case, it was, but honey, I tried, and unfortunately, within this third trimester, sixth month of my pregnancy, I had a miscarriage, which was really devastating because I thought, wow, I could have had a little brother or sister. And then they tried again and they had twins. And those twins didn't make it. So now in the back of my head, right, I'm thinking, wow, I could have had 3 siblings. And what were they? Were they boys, girls? I think they were boys. I'm not sure. So now I'm fantasizing. So maybe, and you don't really mourn these so-called fetuses because you've never bonded with them, but just the idea that you could have had someone, and that sense that there is something missing, that my life could have been very, very different had they been survivors and had they had full-term
That's tough.
lives.
That makes it
Yeah.
tough. And we talked about imaginary friends. Okay?
Yeah.
And we are less prone to PDA, public displays of affection. We didn't grow up being completely touched and such. We tend to be a little more reserved with our public displays of affection.
Interesting.
We are less likely to want kids of our own. We don't have fond memories of our siblings growing up alongside, so we're really not inherently drawn to recreating those times.
I would say in my case it was the opposite.
Yeah.
I
No,
really,
go the other end of the
really
spectrum.
wanted children, mainly because I knew what it felt like to have that, that small dynamics. I wanted something bigger. I wanted a full family. That was really important to me. So I think in that sense, people can go in the opposite direction. Again, I want to hear from you out there. Please
That's it,
do
folks.
call in.
Area code 323-843-2826.
Because I don't want to be the only example here. There are plenty of other examples.
That's
and then
it.
there are layers here. In my case, my mother was very ill with her heart. So not only was I the only child, I happened to be her caretaker. So if she needed a pillow,
man.
I had to go get her pillow. If she needed medicine, I had to go get her medicine. So I had a huge burden on me from early on, whereby I had to be the caretaker of my mother, which, as we know from all of the episodes that we've done, it's the mother that's supposed to care for the child,
Not
and
the
not
other way
the child
around.
that's supposed to care for the mother. In my case, I was always told that my mother could die any day, so I lived with that one.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Well, this explains a little bit about why you're also a psychologist, is you're a little bit more sensitive. We didn't grow up being ribbed and constantly picked on. We never built up the emotional calluses needed to live such a cruel world, so we're often a little bit more sensitive.
Could see how
And
that
we're
can
not
develop.
likely to throw a punch because we didn't, have anybody to be rambunctious with or fight with or whatever. They automatically think that only lonelies are weird. And sometimes they think that you guys have been raised by a cult.
By a cult?
By a cult. And you get a range of looks or responses like, oh, right. I don't know if you ever got that, but some did. We are not great at sharing. Our things are our things. Our food is our food. We didn't grow up having to share, and therefore we're not really that great at it.
Not really that great, except when you have a father who eats really quickly and says, if you want to have dinner, then you better eat quickly because there's going to be nothing left if you don't.
What's he going to eat off your
food
plate?
Down. Pardon me?
What is it going to eat off your plate if you don't eat it so fast?
The food was out there.
Yeah.
And he was fast and he was serving it up. But I was a really, really skinny little girl, and I didn't really particularly like to eat. And my dog was really, really fat. So that answered the question. So I would pretend to put the food to my mouth and then reach under the table.
So you had a best friend right at the table.
I had my best friend, helping me out here. I didn't have to eat everything. So the sharing thing, that is interesting because inherently, it's all mine. That's my toy. So that concept isn't really in there because there's nobody that you're even conceptually aware of that's going to be using that Barbie doll or that particular, unless you have a friend over, right?
Yeah,
and
well,
then you're sharing.
I got when I hit 16, I got a job and I got a stereo and albums, and all of a sudden my albums were disappearing. It's like, oh, okay, where'd my records go? Right? My sister was swiping them.
Your sister was
Yeah,
swiping them.
see,
So you had to learn conflict resolution.
Yes,
right?
I put my stereo in the closet and I locked the door.
And I didn't have that to battle with.
Yeah.
It's like wherever I put it was where it was.
That's where it ended
Yeah,
up.
right.
Yep. And you're a bit obsessive. Without distractions that siblings provide, we tend to get deep into things like reading and hobbies and whatnot because
that's true.
There's nothing else to do, right?
No, that's true. I was very obsessive about my artwork. Every single wrinkle had to be in that drawing. Every single shadow had to be in there. So I did get obsessive. And one thing that I remember doing a lot of is trying to please my mother. Okay?
Well, don't get ahead of me.
And I just remember, I'll never forget, we lived in a small apartment in Montreal, Canada, and I took it upon myself to clean the kitchen floor, but I didn't know where the sponge was or where or whatever towel, or even where so I took a Kleenex. Okay, I took Kleenex and I wet the Kleenex and I obsessively cleaned each tile, and I got such
did
pleasure.
you get a toothbrush out too?
I was almost there, but I remember we had the checkered, like it was like black and white, something like that. That marbly kind, the old linoleum floors. And I remember wetting the tissues and just going through each spot on the floor. And then it gave me such satisfaction. And I thought, oh, my mommy's going to come home and go, wow, look at the floor. They're so shiny.
Spit spot.
So then you get into, because you're an only, right? You think, well, you don't have a sister or brother to really play off of. So you think, okay, so what am I going to do today? Oh, today I'm going to please my mother. Well, tomorrow I'm going to make a painting and please my father. Something of the sort.
We are all trying to please our parents.
Yes, aren't we? And so for those of you who are especially people pleasers, we have 3 episodes.
We've done a lot of shows on that one.
3 on
we sure
that
did.
show.
Yeah. This carries on well into adulthood. We feel a deep need to make our parents proud, mostly because we are our parents' sole concern for the entirety of their formative years, right? From our formative years, right?
Yes.
I was going to say, if you're listening to us, thanks for tuning in. You are listening to Dr. Judy WTF here on UBN Radio Network. We are talking about only lonely children. And you guys are your parents' favorite child, or maybe least favorite child. And if you have any issues with that, you can call us, and the number is area code 323-843-2826. You can hear us every Thursday at 8 o'clock p.m. here on the Pacific in Los Angeles, because a lot of you have asked when the heck are we on, because you pull us on YouTube, we don't know. And you can call in as well. So that's when we're on every Thursday. And, of course, WTF is What the Freud.
And another thing I want to bring up is in family dynamics where there are several siblings, we have usually a scapegoat, we have a mascot, we have a lost child, we have a golden child, and I think I was all of the above.
You're everything.
I think I was. Sometimes I was the clown because I wanted to distract the family from the family pain. Sometimes I was the golden child. Oh, come here, tell a joke. You're so funny. Okay. Other times I was dismissed. Okay, you're finished with the joke.
Get lost.
Get lost. Goodbye. You're done.
Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes I really was like a lost child because I was ignored because they were busy. So I think that I had the experience of actually being all those wheels in the cog, all of those dynamics in one family dynamic. And then bringing up the subject of what happens when your parents die or when they're ill, or your grandparents are ill, and tag, you're it. You are it.
You are it.
And so
it's more devastating.
It is very devastating, and not only that, but the responsibility on that only child to care for it. Because in my family, we didn't send people to the old age home. In the case of my grandmother, who was the last to go, I took her into my house and I cared for her. And so the responsibility was so much on me, and I had nobody to share it with.
No, tag, you are.
Yeah. And so there's a tremendous, there's a tremendous responsibility. On the other hand, when it comes to inheritance, right?
Yes.
You don't have to argue with your siblings.
It's all there.
It's all, you don't have that discussion. And so, it's a good, bad, ugly kind of thing. Yeah.
You love attention. Heck, you're on the radio, on YouTube, right? We grow up never having to fight for attention. In fact, we probably received a little too much of it over the years. Well, we got used to being the focal point in social interactions, and that is not an easy thing to give up.
Right. And sometimes it bounces from too much attention to no attention. And that's crazy
Extremes.
making, right? Because
Those extremes.
in one case you're kind of lit up with all the attention, and then everybody goes off to work, and then you're a latchkey, and so there's no attention. So it dysregulates a person, because as we speak of, what it takes to form a healthy human psyche is consistency, right?
Yes.
And connection. So if there's a lot of connect, disconnect, think about that blinking lights mom on and off again. So sometimes she's there, sometimes she's not there. And so you have to always adjust yourself to being alone, or now being social, or now fearing that you're alone and something happened to the people that you love. And so there's just a lot of, I think the most profound thing that I can share about my experience of being alone is that there was a lot of emotional adjustment that I had to constantly make within myself, rather than, how you say when you share your emotions, it's when you share love, it's twice the love.
Shared
Pain is
shared joy is double joy,
right,
and shared sorrow is half sorrow,
right,
implying that you share it or have somebody share it with.
So if you don't have somebody to share it with, and you're sitting there alone, and you see an amazing show, and you just want to say, hey, that was so cool, and you can't turn to your brother or sister, or you can't even turn to your brother and sister and say, that was really screwed up what mom did or what dad did. You can't say that. So then you're sitting there going, am I screwed up? Are my parents screwed up? And there's nobody to say, give you that look and go like, wow, I can't believe mom just treated you like that, or dad just treated you like that. So you don't have what I call a source point to give you a reality check of what's going on. So you have to depend on your own inner reality.
And you might have to grow up fast.
You have to grow up fast, right?
We talk to ourselves, and sometimes those conversations are pretty darn engaging.
Yeah.
We have overbearing parents. We all have, so it's only natural that they would become a little controlling.
And a little obsessive about you.
Yes.
In my case, I had a grandmother who, my favorite thing was, this was so horrible. I grew up, again, Montreal, Canada. It was very cold in the winter, and she was one of those Jewish grandmothers who wanted to make sure that I stayed warm, okay? So she would just wrap my forehead with the scarf, and it would go round and round and round, and then my mouth, it's like, so wrap this way and then that way, and then zip up and I tend toward being hot and claustrophobic. So as soon as I got out of her vicinity, I would just rip the stuff off. I'd unzip my jacket, and of course I was very active at the time, so I'd heat up pretty quickly. And so, 10 degrees below zero was no problem when you're, playing in the snow or ice skating or doing something like that. But I remember the smothering part of that, the over concern, and then the superstitiousness of, if you go barefoot, you're going to catch a cold, or, if you don't eat, cod liver oil, being forced to eat cod liver oil, because it's almost like, they're your one seed of survival, right? They want to pump that one seed and make sure that, the genetic heritage goes on.
The genetic line is perpetuated. Yeah.
So I got to eat all this disgusting food like ground lung. Can you imagine?
Ground
lung. I don't know.
Oh my goodness, I haven't heard that before.
But that was the most disgusting. My grandmother, I guess in old Hungary they use different parts of the body. And so that night was ground lung with bread. And so she'd soak the bread and the lungs, and then she would grind it together and fry it up. And I'm just glad I had a dog.
Oh my gosh. Now is that ground? Is that cow lung, pig lung,
Who the
chicken
hell
lung?
knows? I mean, it was bad lung, okay?
It was black lung.
It took my breath away. Let's put it this way, okay? It was just bad, but I know it's comedic, but I have a feeling that plus my parents' family they were all Holocaust survivors.
Yes, they were.
So again, the layers. So here's one child, Holocaust family. the survivors have a child,
Absolutely,
and that
yeah.
child is golden. Stuff her
it.
with cod liver oil and lungs and
Lung.
whatever. It's like, okay,
Oh, man.
oh man.
Well, we're a little bummed that we don't have aunts and uncles, and we've already talked about this a little bit. Unless you may marry into the situation, we never have a little niece or nephew. We don't always play well with others. This was interesting, and to expand upon this is the case usually until the 5th grade. You kind of figure it out beyond the 5th grade. We have difficulty operating the parts of a team because they never really engaged in any type of group play as children.
And one thing that I remember is that because I didn't really know how to be part of a team, I always felt that I was the last one picked on the team, and I was. I was taller than the average student. I was thinner than the average student, and I just stuck out like a sore thumb, and I felt internally alone, and I'd just stand there, and they would say, okay, let's pick the baseball team players. And okay, there was a team captain on one and the other, and I'd be like the last picked. And it would it reinforced the negative core belief that I'm not special, or I'm not wanted, or I'm not good enough, or so sometimes when you carry around these negative core beliefs, then they really do manifest. And
yes, they do.
People pick up on you energetically, and they think, no, I don't think I want her on the team. She doesn't seem like she knows how to be a team player. And I think part of that was true. So when I got on the baseball field, I was actually scared of the ball. And so when the ball came at me, because I didn't have brothers and sisters to play pitch and catch with, it was like, please, like put me out there in the field so I could just stay away from the ball. Just don't get me near the ball. So I didn't have a lot of practice with other children insofar as team sports. So,
well, I didn't either because my father was a workaholic.
I see.
So
okay.
Playing ball was like, no, it was impossible.
Right.
And, at least you were picked. Because I learned the hard way that
Hardly.
there's those that are picked, that were picked first, they were picked last,
right.
And then there were those that were never picked.
Yeah, and then
that was me.
Those that were never picked.
Oh, you can have Walt. It wasn't even picked, just like, just an afterthought.
Right. And
so
then,
unfortunately, I know that feeling.
You know the feeling. And then I think one other aspect that I noticed is that because I was so adultified, I was such a little adult, that I became, instead of my mother becoming my mother, she became my friend.
Yes.
And I started calling her by her first name.
Yes.
And so the dynamics shifted.
That
so
changed.
again, she was sick, so I took care of her. So in that case, I was kind of like her caretaker. And then later on, I became her best friend and confidant. And so so everything
probably after your
shifted
dad died.
for me.
Yeah.
So it helped me become a better psychologist because I had to really learn how to be a psychologist to my own mother.
Yeah.
She was my parents were my first patients. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You don't always remember your childhood accurately because you don't have siblings to remind you of what happened.
That is huge. That is so huge. So it makes every loss more profound. So when you lose a grandmother, you lose a parent, then what you're really feeling is that you're losing this huge memory bank. Because it's true, because everyone holds information about you. And siblings are probably the most profound people to hold that information for you, shared experiences. So I didn't have a lot of that.
Right, because it's just you and mom and dad.
And my memories.
And your memories.
And cousins, if I'm lucky. Right.
If you're lucky.
Yeah.
You used to pretend you had siblings, though, because, mine, this one lady's writing the article, says hers was a college-age sister with red hair and a fancy car. She didn't know why, but she made up an imaginary sibling.
Oh, interesting.
And the imaginary sibling was a globe-trotting college-age sister with red hair and a fancy car. We're not competitive. We often lack the overwhelming desire because so many have to turn mundane events into opportunities for competition. Because there wasn't any opportunity to have any competition with anybody, right? I'll race you to the car, or the first one home gets a shower, or whatever. I mean, it's just you.
There goes sibling rivalry too.
There is
right?
no sibling rivalry,
and there goes conflict resolution because you don't really develop the skills to negotiate. Who's going to go first to shower, or who's going to get in the front seat and ride up front with mom or dad. So those things, you never learn how to negotiate those things.
No.
Yeah.
So, and lastly, we are just like everybody else. So stop bringing it up all the time because we're sensitive about it.
Huh.
There was one thing that I found on the time we've got left. Let me see if I can find a quick article that was some of the bad things about it. Oh, you want to know some only children that were actors and actresses?
Yeah, I think that'd be interesting.
Where'd they go?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Natalie Portman, Leonardo DiCaprio, which doesn't surprise me, Anthony Hopkins, Robert De Niro, Daniel Radcliffe of the Hogwarts fame, Al Pacino, Robin Williams, Jack Nicholson, Pierce Brosnan, John Lennon and Elvis Presley, Tommy Lee Jones, Cary Grant, Elizabeth Taylor, Lauren Bacall, Betty White, Gregory Peck, James Dean, Frank Sinatra, Clark Gable. Let's see who else we got here. Ringo Starr, Elton John and Barry Manilow, Anthony Perkins, Don Rickles, Sammy Davis Jr., and Elvis Costello and Dick Cavett, just to name just a few.
It's interesting because all of these people that you mentioned are such fine actors, aren't they? And so it makes sense that they were able to live in their own world and not really get distracted. And so they were deep into their craft, and they were able to so focus within. So I think there's that ability that gets created to really self-focus because... And again, I think also when you're an only child, your parents have resources to send you to acting school and to develop your musical talent. And so you may have piano lessons whereby other children may not, and so on. So I think that there's a richness, too, that comes with the economics of being an only child.
Yes, it's definitely economic, especially in today's here. But here's some bad things. While only children may turn out to be successful seeking perfectionists, they certainly aren't perfect. As adults, only children can be too focused on themselves, only assuming that they are right and know best. They can also feel entitled to have more than equal standing and importance in relationships and may be controlling, which, of course, as we've learned in a few shows we've done, might develop a little bit of a narcissistic tendency. Yeah.
Because they don't have that practice to share with other people in their household. And with regards to parents, they have to share with their parents, but it's not the same as having to split your, the allowance, for example, or take turns using the toy, or negotiate which TV channel you're going to watch if there's only one TV in the household, which was my case. So, those skills are not practiced. So, it doesn't transfer well sometimes. And
here's a few.
Into adulthood.
They don't know how to hold a baby. They really suck at babysitting. They need a lot of personal space. They try to desperately be normal around roommates. They don't play well with others. Certain holidays they just don't celebrate. I didn't get that one, but maybe someone can call in the last few minutes.
Why would that be so?
I don't know because anyway, your friends get worded out because you treat them like actual family. You attempt to bribe them to come over with promises of pizza and late night TV because you want a family and you want friends. You never had the opportunity. I like this one. You never had the opportunity to blame your brother or your sister for anything.
That sucks. And that's true.
Big mess in the living room. It's like, my brother did it.
And my father was a little obsessive. So if I went into the bathroom and moved his shampoo.
Moved the shampoo.
No,
oh my gosh.
No. And no, I couldn't stick that one on a sibling. So So it's so that everything's magnified. The good is magnified. The bad. It's like all eyes are on you. So if you do something wrong, it's big. If you do something right,
it's big.
It's big, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes they're just plain sick of you or doing their own thing, so then you're not. So it's very confusing. So you're scapegoat, you're golden child, you're mascot because you've got to entertain them out of their whatever, anxiety, depression.
One story talked about how they're having this entertaining party, right? They're having all their friends over, mom and dad, and so they get the child over, the lonely child, to come over and tell jokes, right, to entertain everybody, right?
Yeah, that was
joke?
me. That was me.
Yeah.
But then I'd get dismissed as soon as they got bored. It's like, okay, now get the hell out of here. We're having fun.
We're going to go back and have adult beverages. You can't have any.
And that, I think the hardest was going to bed at night and having my own room and nobody to whisper to at night. And so it was really sometimes hard to get to sleep because my parents would close the door. And, you don't really go out of the room at that point. It wasn't cool for me to get up and crawl into my parents' bed. That was just not done. So I was alone in the room. And you know how nice it would have been for me to have a bunk bed, for example, and whisper to my brother or my sister, just tell stories or giggle at night. I didn't have that. I did with my cousin, which made it so precious to, hours of begging, can I please sleep over at my cousin's house? My favorite cousin, Susie, she was the one, and we stayed up literally all night because I was getting my dose of sisterhood in. Yeah.
The sister.
Right. My sister.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the house is creepy because it's a shrine to your personal achievements. And then lastly, the family's future, as you've mentioned, rests solely on you.
Right. Right.
You're it.
Yeah.
So we're going to do our last segment, which is Shrink That Tune, which is a song that came to me. I'll take the credit or blame for this one. It's by Three Dog Night, and it's called One.
But why is it by Three Dog Night then?
Well, there's a story behind it. And basically, back in the day when it was really cold, you'd have one dog. And if it was colder, you'd have two dogs to keep you warm. And if it was really cold, you'd have three dogs to keep you warm.
Yeah, I like three dogs. Yeah. The more dogs, the happier I am.
See? So, there you go. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to read the lyrics, and Dr. Judy's going to interpret it from her only lonely psychological perspective.
Good deal.
One is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. Two can be as bad as one. It's the loneliest number since the number one.
Okay, I want to talk about this because what's interesting is from the Freud perspective is that I would pick people in my life, and I didn't know this because I wasn't a psychologist at the time, that were quite narcissistic and didn't mirror me. So even though I was one, when I did pick another, I would pick another person that was pretty disconnected. So here it reflects two can be as bad as one or worse because there's nothing more lonely than being in a twosome when that person is not connected to you.
It's not a true twosome.
Right. So it's the lonely. Two can be as bad as one. It's the loneliest number since the number one. Good observation on this writer's part.
And some marriages are probably that way too.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No is the saddest experience you'll ever know. Yes, it's the saddest experience you'll ever know. Because one is the loneliest number you'll ever do. One is the loneliest number, worse than two. It's just not good anymore since you went away. Now I spend all my time just making rhymes of yesterday.
So clearly this song is about a relationship. Yeah. Somebody went away from the relationship. So and this interpreted from a relationship point of view, so the mirroring is gone. It's just not good anymore because we're wired to connect. So when we're alone, we don't have that playmate to bounce ideas off of and to connect with. Yeah.
One is the loneliest number. One is the loneliest number you'll ever do. It's no good anymore since you went away because one is the loneliest number. One is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. And that basically is the song. One is the loneliest number. One is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. And that's basically the song One by Three Dog Night from our one and only show that we're going to do on one and only lonely children.
Very fitting song.
Unless anything else you can add, subtract, multiply, or divide. Nope.
No, the chorus just goes on.
That's it.
And on and on. And emphasizing this loneliness. When is the loneliest? When is the loneliest? When is the loneliest? But at the beginning of the song, it does say that when you're in a twosome and you're disconnected and you're not connecting, that can even be lonelier. So I just want to add this. I remember a friend of mine saying to me when I was going through my divorce, and he said, it's hard to be alone when you're not all by yourself. And so when you're in a relationship where you're not all by yourself, but you're alone, it's even worse than being alone.
Yes.
Because there's that person that you want to connect to, but there's a human disconnect. So this is that line. Two can be as bad as one. So with that, let's close out with a tune.
We're going to close out with a tune. This has been Dr. Judy WTF, and I'm your host, Walt Lusk, here at UBN Radio Network. You can catch us on YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, of course, iHeartRadio. And you can write us if you have an idea for a song or an idea of a show, which some of you have written to and have been wonderful, and we appreciate that in the new year.
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely. We've been doing this for over 3.5 years, so we can use all the help we can get. It's not just us here anymore.
And thank you very much for everyone who's commented and for all the people who've signed up for Mind Map Therapy, and to my staff who do Mind Map Therapy both in person and teletherapy, and just reminding everybody that we have many, many counselors on staff who are trained in the system, and budgetarily there's somebody for every budget on the staff. And so if you need that kind of work, if you want that kind of information, reach out to us.
We are here for you.
And we will answer more questions.
Absolutely. So thanks for tuning in, thanks for watching, and thanks for listening. Until next time, God bless everyone. I'm your host, Walt Lusk, and of course, Dr. Judy Rosenberg.